this thing on. I don't know. Is the world out there? Are you ready for this? Hey everybody, my name is Derek and I am the owner, creator, and head silicone slinger here at Amavidi, where we make silicone... I used to say we make silicone sculptures. At least that's what I use on TikTok, because TikTok can be what it is. So, tonight I have an inspiration, actually. I don't know if my guest tonight knows that they were actually an inspiration for me to get started and something to aspire to, but it is true. And, you know, I always start off the conversations with my guests by asking them a few questions. And one of the questions I asked was, what would you like to talk about? And let me just quote real quick what my guest tonight wanted to talk about. GOO and HOLES. GOO and HOLES. All right, I think we can do that. So without further ado, I would like to bring on Kenton from Funkit Toys. Kenton, how you doing? Hey, good to see you.
I'm doing all right.
Yeah. I hope I didn't... Where's that? Okay, there it is. I don't know. I hope I didn't put you on the spot there, but yeah, you were an inspiration for me. You were something for me to aspire to when I got started.
Well, yay. Yeah, I don't know. I just try and do the best that I can, and if other people take a hint from that, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I first started, and actually, I'll even say this, I still don't know how you do some of your pours, even with, you know, having done this for 4 or 5 years. I have some suspicions, but the pours that you do that are clear and have that swirl of color through them, that is, I mean, that's just gorgeous to me. And that, like I said, that was one of the inspirations for me to get started. And I mean, I'm not going to ask you for your secrets here, because that's not what we do.
The answer is very simple. It's the same way I would run my kitchen when I cook. Secrets and also lies.
I love it. Both of those are wonderful things. So now the question that often comes up is one that I'm going to ignore tonight. One of those questions is, how did you get started? But I think the better question is, why did you get started? You know, given all the different things that you could be doing, why are you doing this?
This is the thing that stuck. I've tried a lot of different things. I went to art school and I dropped out, and then I went to culinary school and I did chefing for a while. And I like to say that I have a lot of respect for nurses, because they're the only people who have a worse work-life and pay balance than cooks. I'm sure that's an oversimplification. Working sucks. But as far as like stress, the combination of stress, bad hours, and pay is concerned, you know, you can cook in a restaurant and you can be a nurse, and you will not be appreciated for how valuable your skills are. So I did not cook for long, but, you know, I learned to read material safety data sheets, and I learned a lot about sanitation and chemical safety and making things easy to clean. So it all kind of snowballed into what I'm doing. I was looking for some time into becoming a sexuality educator, and I sort of face planted into doing this. I've always made stuff. I've always liked designing things. So it ended up being a culmination of almost every skill point I'd allotted from age 13 up.
So was there anything, I guess, you know, one of the questions that I kind of want a topic that I want to kind of massage around a little bit is design. And I'm kind of curious, your designs have a very refined aspect to them. And that's something I really appreciate.
So the great thing about doing things that are simple is that there's, well, the annoying thing, but also the fun thing, there's nowhere to hide your crimes. You know, if you have a whole bunch of like scales or pointy bits sticking out of something, you don't have to put as much refinement into each individual curve. Like, you have to get the whole thing to look right. But if your design is 3 curves, essentially, like just a few spleens coming together, each of those curves has to look perfect or it's just going to look off. So like with the swing, that, you know, it's hours and hours of work just to get that one back curve right, let alone all the like proportions and everything, and then also making it easy to mold. So yeah, it's a lot of just going back over every single thing. I do a lot of my design work in very, very low poly. I think the cashew, for example, only has like 5 or 6 actual rings in the tiers of the actual bulb part to get that smoothness. And it's just balancing them all as perfectly as I can before doing the like actual texture adding to it.
Yeah, and I think you really said it well when you said that, you know, there's nowhere to hide. That when you have such simplicity of design or such refined design work, that you can't hide your mistakes, or you can't justify it as saying, oh, that's just part of, you know, the scales or whatever it might be. And that's something I've always appreciated about your work, is just how beautiful it is.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know. I definitely draw a lot of inspiration from some of the simpler Tantus designs, and Joy, like all the simpler curved things. And I mostly try and work within my own aesthetic. But I haven't done a lot of that recently just because I've been working on silly stuff. The last year and change, I've been just doing just whatever dumb idea I come up with. Yeah. That's what I'm working on. If it makes me chuckle, then I'm making it happen.
Right. I love the slappy hand that you have. And we'll come back.
The sticky hand is a new favorite, of course.
I love that. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. But, you know, you talked about your design aesthetic, and it is something that, you know, my question to you is going to be, what drives that for you? Is, you know, the balance between form and function, and does form kind of guide you, or is it the function? And I'll add one more question to the pile here, is that, you know, do you start with an idea of what you want it to do, or is it more about just expressing that idea?
So I actually think about this differently, because sex toys are sexuality is so very much in the mind that the form is part of the function. So I divide sex toy design largely into practical versus fantastic. So practical is like thing hit G spot, thing hit prostate, move, squish it, do the right things, hit the buttons. And fantastical is the thing that makes you actually want to put it on or in your body. So I err on the side of practical designs. I'm not making something to a specific fantasy. I'm making things that are simply beautiful and are able to push the buttons they need to. But you can't go hard one or the other, because you could make a fucking machine that has the perfect stroke for somebody and is shaped just right, and it's like custom built to hit their spots exactly as it is. And that doesn't matter if they don't look at it and go, yeah, I'd screw that thing.
Right.
So it's, you know, there are a lot of, I would say most of the companies that are out there right now drive a little bit more to the fantastical as like the thing that's driving the design, because there's, you know, we're all monster fuckers now. It's 2022. Right. So that's like, and that's really important. Like, it does have to be able to hit the bits, but like having the fantasy of wanting to fuck a werewolf or a dragon or a selkie or whatever else, like tentacles, that has to be there for that to work. So I tend to be driven more by the practical and just generally beautify that as much as I can, as opposed to driving toward a specific fantasy. But yeah, the form is the function. It's not so much, we're not building a bridge, we're making things that people have to find appealing.
Right. Okay. Now let's pivot just slightly, and this is another area that you inspired me in, was the no frills dough, or no frill dough.
No frill dough, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love the concept of that. And I mean, why don't you take a second and kind of give us the explanation of what that is and why it came about?
So one of the things that not everyone, most of the enthusiasts, but not everyone realizes about platinum silicone is platinum silicone isn't called platinum silicone because it's platinum grade above gold grade. It's platinum silicone because there's literal platinum in it, causing the individual monomers to react with each other and become solid. And what that means, in addition to many other things, is that it's quite expensive. And as I was starting to do this work and realizing how much I would have to price my toys to be able to keep doing it, I was not thinking of making any kind of profit then, or even it becoming my actual full-time job. I had no illusions that that would ever happen.
But it did.
Yeah, I guess. We'll see how long it lasts. It's been 6 years, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But yeah, it bothered me because, you know, there were at the time, you know, quite a few silicone makers out there, and a lot of them were doing like fairly simple designs, smaller designs, and I knew that it could be done safely and less expensively. But I needed to figure out how, because the main silicone that I work with takes 24 hours to cure. I have to use soap and water to lubricate the molds because I use rigid molds. And that you can't produce a lot of toys that way. So if I were to make anything inexpensively, I wouldn't be able to keep up with the demand if people found out about them. So I worked for, you know, doing a toy a month for a year and a half or so. For the first like 18 months, there was at least one new toy every month. And I figured out how to design toys that I wasn't going to spend tons and tons of time working on, and that I could get out of the molds and then reuse the molds immediately. And I have a silicone blend that cures in half an hour, which is great because, you know, I mean, I'm not 26 anymore. I can't make 100 of them in a day, but that I can make a good amount of in, you know, an afternoon,
right? And
potentially keep up with any demand I run into. And that was the first line of no frill doughs. They're just like medium-sized toys that sell for $24. And I believe they are still the most affordable option in their like size category on the market.
Yeah, I was absolutely impressed that you could put out a platinum cure silicone product at that price point, and it made me kind of dive down the rabbit hole a little bit to figure out what you were doing. And I want to come back to your production process in a minute, because I think that's really interesting. I think that what you do is very different than what 99% of the other makers are doing.
Yeah, I don't think anyone else does what I do, and there's good reasons for that.
Yeah. But kind of as a prelude to that, I wanted to... Do you mind if I read the bio that you sent me?
Go ahead.
I love it.
This has been my bio for conference introductions and speaking things for quite a while.
So, the bio that, if you don't know, what I do is every time before a session, I will send a guest a few questions. And one of those questions is ask them about, do they have a bio that they'd like me to use to talk about them and what they do? And Kenton's bio was just absolutely, I was just floored by it. And here goes. Kenton.
Let the dries dry the wets.
Kenton is a former chef and former respectable member of society who now makes a living using a computer to teach a machine that melts plastic into hot goo to turn that goo into a hole. When the hole hardens, he pours more goo into it to melt it again, waits for it to harden, pours a third goo in, and waits for that to harden, and pulls it out to sell it to people to put in their own holes. Wonderful. I cracked up. I also sent that to George and she loved it as well. And that kind of gave us the theme for tonight's live stream, which was goo and holes. And, you know, there's so much in there that we could tear apart. But it's one of the things I want to kind of get into is your production process, which is very different than most people's. And I hope I'm not giving away any trade secrets because I found them.
Oh, no secrets about the process. Anything that affects or could be perceived to affect the safety of the result. And most of the things that I figure out that aren't what makes my work unique are, transparency has been the gimmick since the beginning. I've always used clear silicone, and it's important that people know how the sausage is made.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I do my videos. Earlier, you mentioned about the misunderstanding about what platinum cure silicone means. It's not a platinum grade. It's the fact that the platinum is a catalyst for the curing process. Now, I mean, we could break it down into, using a computer to teach a machine that melts plastic into hot goo to turn that goo into a hole. It's such an elegant way of saying, you use a 3D printer, right?
Elegant. I do 3D modeling and then I use a 3D printer.
Okay. And do you mind saying what kind of printer it is?
They don't make it anymore, so I won't be competing anyone to get them. The Hatchbox Alpha. Okay. If this thing ever breaks, I will spend a week in bed. And it breaks permanently. It's broken many times, but the beautiful thing about the Hatchbox Alpha is it's essentially like the Jeep of 3D printers in that it is built like a tank and yet really easy to take apart. So I have replaced basically everything in this that isn't one of the electronics. Yeah. Or no, I've replaced the computer. If it isn't the computer or structural, I've replaced it.
See, I have 3 different 3D printers. I have a Prusa Mark III S Plus, I think is what they call it now. I started off as a Mark III S, and then I've done the upgrades to bring it up. And you're right, most of the printers are not easy to work on. The Prusa is not easy to work on. It's a workhorse. I mean, it will print, and it'll print great every day. But if anything goes wrong, it is, you're going to spend a day tearing it down.
Yeah, it's all really easy to lubricate and replace everything. I can, get under the print bed, and I've replaced 2 of the stepper motors. And every time something breaks, I order a big box of them. So
yeah,
Yeah, it's a Delta printer. I imagine most people work with Cartesian, but I find the Deltas make curves better.
Yeah, I don't have a Delta. Both of the FDM printers that I have are Cartesian. I do have a resin printer as well, but it's fairly small, and it gets used for more prototyping and stuff like that. But the 3D printer is only part of it. Then there's the filament. And given the way that you do your process, I'm guessing that you're using ABS?
Yeah.
ABS is not the easiest to work with.
It's got a learning curve, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But the great part is if the working part that you need to be perfect isn't the outer edge, then it's much easier.
Okay.
Because I'm making the molds, so the thing that I actually need to be in good shape is the interior part, which is insulated by the outer edge of the mold, which does crack sometimes.
Excellent point.
Have the adhesion issues.
Yeah, excellent point. I hadn't considered that because I knew that you were making your own molds, and that was kind of where I was headed with all this. Is that most of us, and even myself, we print positives, and so we're printing the actual piece and then making molds of that. You're taking a step out of that process by printing the molds?
Yep. Yeah. One, just generally don't like producing waste material as much as I can avoid it. So cut out another step. Great. The molds, I think, are a fair bit more durable. And if something goes wrong with them, it's usually the toy rather than the mold that is damaged, which is great. And I've gotten better at designing so that the molds have even more longevity. But yeah, I have molds that I've been working with for over 5 years. I've only ever made one armadillo mold, and I believe that was toward the beginning of the second year I was working on this stuff.
Right. George has thrown a comment up here for me and asked if you have any products in front of you that you could show us while you're talking about them.
I have one, but fortunately, it's the one that everyone wants to see. So let's see how much dust got on it in the transit process and how much I can shake off. Yeah.
Yes, there it is. The slappy hand.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to have around. I love this thing very much. I'm very proud of it. And the thing that doesn't really show up on the website, I don't know if you can see that, but it is not safe for work.
Now, what's the firmness on that? Because you got a lot of stretch there and a lot of flop.
It's 0050 because that's what I have. I don't like working with soft silicone. Because I design so very much to for a thing to be a shape and press on things, softer silicones don't do that as well. So it's something I'm learning more and teaching myself to design for. But you really have to make things much thicker for soft silicone to be effective in terms of pressing on things. So I would, in a perfect world, if I could afford to get another big drum of yet another silicone size, or if I had the space, and hopefully I'll have the space soon, but I don't right now, then I would be making these in 0030. But right now, 0050 is great. You get a lot of stretch. I can stretch at my full wingspan.
Yeah.
So this is about 5.5 feet of length. And you can hit things probably about 4 or 5 feet away.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that idea. I have had this idea or this want to do impact toys in silicone. And last week with Penguin After Dark and with you and it's everybody else has done it and figured out a way to do it, and I'm sitting over here still trying to figure out what I want to do. So,
fair warning, it is a tough sell. Every time I've been to like kink conventions, people are very unsure about flexible impact toys.
Okay.
Especially because what I'm doing is this isn't a flogger. It's not a paddle.
Right.
People don't really know what to expect of it. And especially with I call it a flogger, but it isn't really the jellyfish.
Yeah.
People don't really know what to make of it. And it can be difficult to design it so you can have like a safety strap. I have a little divot here that's deeper than the rest, and I punched a hole in it. But yeah, it's a tough sell to kinksters to have a flexible thing. I find if you spend like 10 minutes with a floppy paddle, you learn how to use it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who aren't investing that time. People like things to be easy. Yeah.
Right.
You would think kinksters would be more curious and like trying new things, but sometimes they're just not.
Yeah. So then the next step is we pour goo into the 3D printed mold, and I don't know. I've always heard of
that
vapor
one's
smoothing.
acetone.
Okay, so I've known about vapor smoothing, but
yeah,
not...
I use liquid acetone. I use an acetone ABS slurry. So it is it does have some ABS dissolved in it, and I find I get better results from that than from pure acetone. It also matters what ABS you're using. They come in different purities, and it's not transparent. It's taken me a really long time to find a brand that I like the results of, and ABS is not a popular printing thing anymore.
Nope.
It's being rapidly replaced by PETG, so it gets harder and harder to find the like more neutral or light colors that I like to work with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've noticed or had this issue, but darker colors tend to need different heat levels to print. Like if lighter colors, you print at a slightly lower temperature. So every time I have to get a different like gray instead of natural or white, it's just another process.
Right. Is there a way to smooth PETG?
I don't know, because PETG is polyethylene terephthalate, and that's the same thing. Phthalates are the same thing that make jelly toys so toxic. So I don't want to work with it.
Gotcha. Man, you've already touched... You touched on something else that is something that I aspire to, and that is your depth of knowledge. And there's so much that you know about silicone and the way that silicone cures and things like that. But also, the PETG versus ABS and how you can keep that process to be body safe. So I hope to be as smart and as knowledgeable as you are.
I mean, everything I know I learned from looking it up online. It's all out there.
Yeah.
My very, very first forays into like silicone mold making were assisted by tutorials by a person by the name of Kit Stubbs, who runs the Effing Foundation, which does grants for sexuality and sex education-based products. It's awesome. EFFING, they're great. If you're out there and you have like a big project you don't have the funding for, it's worth going in to try to get a grant from them. They're awesome, great humans. But way back in the day, they made a DIY sex toy tutorial, and they used the silicone, which I use now, Sort of Clear 18, to do it. And they like cast a dildo with a little TARDIS in it. I also got to see, I've met them a couple times at this point, and I got to see another thing they did, which is a clear dildo with programmable LED lights going up the inside of the shaft, which they wear in a strap at conference parties. Wonderful person. Love Kit. Kit Stubbs is brilliant.
Yeah.
Go find them. Fantastic. But yeah, I got started with that tutorial, and then talking to silicone companies, reading their tutorials. I talked to some representative from Wacker Chemicals who gave me some good tips. I don't know, like most people in the US get their silicone from Reynolds Advanced Materials, it seems like. But the big three suppliers of silicone are actually Wacker out of Germany, Shin-Etsu in, I believe, Japan. I could be wrong. And Dow Corning, who invented silicone and is US based.
Okay.
Back in the 40s. But Reynolds Advanced Materials is where most of us get it because it's much more hobbyist friendly.
Yeah. At the volumes that we're talking about, then, Reynolds does have a place for us. Boy, there's so much I want to talk about, but I want to keep myself contained slightly.
Don't. Let the nerd run through you.
Oh, yes. I mean, I could totally nerd out because, I love the technology aspect of it. And I love the fact that, there's so much that we can do with it. And that silicone is actually a fairly malleable, I don't know, it's a good base to start from. But
it's shockingly forgiving.
But there's so much you can also do with it beyond, just taking out of bucket A and bucket B and mixing it together. And you mentioned it earlier, but this is one of the things that I do is I blend my own silicones. Is that I actually start with a very soft silicone and a very firm silicone. And I use those to blend to the firmnesses that I want. And that allows me to, I have 2 silicones that I keep on hand, but between them, I have 6 different silicone firmnesses that I can offer.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I've only done that by accident.
I had talked to the Reynolds rep one time, and, let me see. I did this 2 ways. I started off with just a single silicone and then used hardener and softener, or hardener and deadener, to take it to the extremes that I wanted to take it to. But I found it was real inconsistent. And especially with deadeners, they, depending on, I never figured out what the variable was, but it was one of those things that I could do the same thing twice and get different results. And then I was like, well, okay, I can't do it with just one silicone. What if I go to the extremes and then blend to the middle? And that worked out really well for me by, it becomes a little bit more consistent in terms of viscosity, and it becomes a little bit more consistent in terms of curing times, because at the various ends of the spectrum, you can get different curing times. But that's how I approached it. And I think that there's a lot more that could be done in that arena, but I don't know that anybody else is kind of playing in that area.
Yeah, it's I took a tour of Uberime's lab, and he did an accidental blend of 0030 and 50 or something, and ended up with a bit of a mess. I think it was just kind of flustered from me being there. It was sort of a surprise. Yeah. Just happened to be in I was on a family vacation, and I ended up at an Airbnb 2 blocks from his workshop.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I was like, oh, hey, I know who's in Orlando, and messaged him. It was, but it's interesting how much I want to experiment, because my molds, in terms of the shapes I can get, because they're 3D printed, you have to do the bridging stuff and where bubbles get caught. It's fairly unforgiving in terms of overhangs. Yeah. So I've had this idea in my head for a while that I want to try, of pulling a perfectly straight dildo when it's half cured, and then curving it over something to create more of a J shape. I think that'd be I need to actually give that a try with a no frildo, because those are the easy ways to do experiments. But yeah, it's interesting where you can like interrupt the process and change things.
Yeah. One of the things that I have noticed, and we each have our own way of. This is very much an art, and people try to approach it as a science. And you do this, it'll come out perfectly. But I'm of the sense that this is an art, and that we can play with the materials in different ways. And the way that you solve certain problems can be, the way you approach it is up to you. There are a couple of pigments that I use that have a real strong tendency to clump up, and so
Which ones?
Generally the blues. My blues, for whatever reason, are often very clumpy. Yeah.
Do you know which? Who do you order it from?
Usually TKB.
TKB? I don't know them. Is it a very deeply pigmented blue? So that's probably phthalocyanin. I don't know what their problem was if they're getting it clumpy, but I've had no issues with Smooth On. I use their phthalocyanin blue, and that one's, I haven't had any issues with it. But I recently got a pot of yellow from Polytech, and it was all lumps. It's just so many little different lumps, and I have to just mix the hell out of it.
Yeah. Interesting.
I make a lot of my own pigments as well.
Okay.
So I've developed a couple of like Dremel attachments for pigment mixing. I just need to print another one for that yellow and really go to town, I guess.
Okay, first off, because I got questions. What'd you think of the Polytech materials? Have you worked with any of the...
I haven't used their silicones, but I love some of their pigments. I get their... when Reynolds... Over the course of me working with Reynolds Advanced Materials, they've changed their blue at least twice. And I need consistent results. So Reynolds Blue currently is the phthalocyanin, which is great. It's a beautiful pigment, but it's translucent. Yeah. And I want all of my colors to match each other. So I use a cobalt to illuminate from Polytech that cobalt is, I very open about this, it is toxic. It is also, 1, fully encapsulated, 2, about a gram to pigment my largest toys. So it's 1, it's toxic. 2, to get to a level that would be a problem for you, you would have to be 1, 100 kilogram human, and 2, magically extract all the cobalt from 32 of my largest toys. And then eat all of it. Oh yeah, that's the third part, eat it.
Yeah.
Actually, no. It would be about 64 because that weight includes the silicone it's suspended in.
Yeah.
So...
yeah, I have I like the Polytech materials, and Reynolds, Smooth On is so well, they've been really consistent in the past. I hope they continue to be. But the way I solved the problem for myself was I used a silicone thinner to mix that pigment, that dry pigment, into. And then used a hand blender and blend the hell out of it, and that solves the problem.
I use the silicone thinner to mix with my dry pigments right now, but I used to use like this lovely thick dimethicone that I was able to source. I had trouble getting it. I ran out like right at the beginning of the pandemic when everything was just impossible to find. Yeah. So I would love to go back to that because it produced a thicker, easier to work with pigment. It was I want to say it was 500 centistokes. It was great.
Yeah, that was one of the I'm getting around to my story now, which is that when I solved that problem, it changed the, not using a whole lot, but just adding that little bit of thinner of that particular color. And if I use a dry pigment on the other color, they have different viscosities. and that thinner.
Pain of my existence.
What was interesting is that sometimes, especially if I do stripes pours, then the problem becomes that sometimes the two colors on the outside have thinner in them, but the color in the middle doesn't. And there's almost like this blooming effect that happens after it's poured, is that the silicone kind of moves on its own after it's poured and kind of creates this, it's almost like it's flowing around inside the mold.
Yeah, that's I'm pretty sure that's just osmosis from the more free dimethicone moving to areas of less free dimethicone. The issue I run into when I use the excess, I pre-mix my pigments with additional silicone before using them. And the yellow makes it much runnier than the other ones do, which is why I'd love to figure out. I think I tracked down at some point what the name of the pigment is, and I'd love to get a hold of some dry pigment of that yellow, but it's a really long chemical name. Yeah. Even worse than diketopyryl orange. But yeah, it's it comes out softer because it's got so much more of the dimethicone in it. So when I pour those little pots of premixed pigment into the fun size fun kits, they come out with some sections softer for the rainbow ones. And what that happens with that is the contact between the firmer and the softer silicones. It starts to swell the firmer one and shrink the softer one as the dimethicone migrates through it. So you end up with a toy that's it should be like this, and it's like that. And that's an exaggeration of the actual swelling. But yeah, that's the same reason dual density toys over time have the weird base swell and stuff, is because they're interacting in there.
Interesting. Okay, so I remember a video that you did with Dangerous Lily, and I believe you were talking about silicone lubes. Do you have anything?
Is this the Woodhull safety presentation?
It might have been. It looked like it was a. It looked like it was kind of a class or presentation.
Yeah. That was a presentation we did at Woodhull Sexual Freedom Summit.
What are your? I don't want you to spend or go into all the details of it, but everybody says you can't use silicone lubes with silicone toys. Do you have anything to add to that?
So, what people say will happen is that the toy will melt. This is untrue. Right. There is anecdotal evidence that people have had the surface of the toy change in appearance or texture. And what I think that might be is some silicone toys from bigger manufacturers that can afford to do this are treated on the outside with a polymer called perylene. They're put into a vacuum chamber and misted with perylene, which seals them and prevents them from absorbing smells as much, and also gives them a less clingy texture. So it's possible that some silicone lubes also have something in them that interacts with the perylene. I know Uberlube, for example, has vitamin E, which means that it is dimethicone mixed in oil to some extent. There has to be some kind of oil in there. I think. I'm not 100% sure on that. So it's possible something is interacting with perylene on a toy, and I don't know much about that. That this is fully supposition on my part. I've done no experiments to this effect. It's just something I'm aware of as a thing that's done that might produce that result. Another thing is simply that many toys, especially early on, were labeled as silicone even though they weren't. I can't remember what the site was called, now defunct. Someone had access to a university laboratory and could test toys with a mass spectrometer and found, toys that were labeled as silicone or silagel were 63% phthalates. And I don't know if that's by weight or by volume. I imagine it's by mass because that's how a lot of chemical stuff is done. But yeah, they were just jelly rubber. So there's a lot of myths about what silicone does that are based on things that were labeled as silicone that weren't. Like them melting together if they touch. They don't do that, but jelly rubber can.
I've got a flop bucket that I throw all my flops into. And, over the last 5 years, I have so many in there that, and they just keep going in there. And I can pull something out of the bottom of it, and it's perfectly good, and it's been crushed by these toys that have been sitting there for the last 4 years. And so I absolutely agree with you that, a platinum cure silicone toy is not going to melt over time, or it's not going to melt because it's in contact with another silicone toy. Now, is there some osmosis going on in terms of when you use a silicone lube with a silicone toy, that the toy is actually absorbing? Not absorbing. That's not quite the right word, but there's
absorption.
Is it absorption?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
One thing is getting soaked up by another thing.
Right, but it also gets released again if you take that
Sometimes.
lube away. Okay.
So, it's osmosis, which means a thing is traveling from a place of greater saturation to lesser saturation. So the free dimethicone or even cyclosiloxane sometimes in silicone lubes, if they're thicker, will get absorbed by the polydimethylsiloxane toy, and it will, float around in there. And sometimes they do leach out a bit. I hate the word leach because it's very much associated with like bad things, but
that's why I use the word weep. Yeah, I use the word weep. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it can come back out sometimes. I have left silicone like sample things that were all the same size in silicone in like silicone lubes and in oil, and silicone can also absorb acetone, by the way. The thing that makes silicone and safe is not that it's not porous or that it won't absorb anything, it's that it's hydrophobic. So any pores that there are, which I haven't heard if there's a consensus yet on whether there are holes on any scale that matters, but it's hydrophobic, so it won't like grow anything.
But then it's
it
also
can absorb oil.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's oleophilic, which means that it absorbs or attracts oils.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which means that's why it can hold on to smells so well. Mm-hmm. Most of the smells that our body creates or that we use in soaps, for example, are oil soluble. And the silicone can absorb, the fragrances from, say, dish soap. One of my friends has one of those silicone cups, and it would be great. I love the idea of silicone dishware, but he cleans it in Dawn dish soap. So no matter what you're drinking out of it, you could be drinking the finest New York tap water, and you stick your nose in it to drink out of it, and it smells like Dawn. So all my cleaning is with, I use 7th generation free and clear dish soap to do all my toy cleaning and stuff, and that's great. Yeah. Some of the ones that, like, say unscented or something, have fragrance in them, and I always just open them up in the store if I'm trying another brand, because fuck you. But yeah, I mean, it's oh yeah, so we were talking about osmosis. Yeah, I left things in silicone lube for a month, and the point where they like stopped growing in size was it gained about 20% diameter. And when I left a toy in, the narrow edges along my base sort of potato chipped out for the same reason potato chips do. Like there's more shrinking on the outside or the inside, or it's uneven, but then it evened out over time as the the dimethicone was achieved like even saturation throughout the thing. But the thing it does cap out. It softens the toy a little bit. It makes it a little bit less firm because there's more free dimethicone in there over the chain.
Does it change the strength, the tear strength?
So my theory on this, and I haven't tested this, the silicone I work with is incredibly tough for silicone. But considering it is the same amount of strength and structure and the same number of like bonded polymers over a larger surface area, I would say that yes, it is slightly weaker.
Okay.
But the thing about that is, like, if you're doing this on like Shore 0030, sure, you're fucked. It's already a weak ass silicone. I've never encountered a super soft silicone that could handle any amount of tearing. They stretch great, but if there's like so much as a nick, it's gone. But yeah, like for my silicones that I work with, other than the softer one, it's still stronger than any of the other silicones I've used. So I didn't have a problem.
Okay.
But yeah, it is slightly weaker.
Before we go too far, because I've been watching the chat a little bit, and there are things that I want to touch on that were mentioned. Number one, can we define dimethicone?
Oh, dimethicone is a silicone monomer. So many things in chemistry have a monomer form and a polymer form. The monomer is the single link of chain in what, when they bond together, becomes a polymer, which we typically call plastics. But there's all sorts of things that are polymers. When you season a cast iron skillet, you are turning the oil of choice monomer into a polymer via heat. You're polymerizing the oils. That's one of the reasons fried food is so unhealthy, is because you're polymerizing the oils as you fry it. And if you reuse the oil, you get more and more oil polymer in there, which your body has a harder time getting rid of. So dimethicone, silicone was named before they knew exactly what it was. They believed chemical names are like a very rigorous language, essentially, of what different endings mean. So silicone was named silicone when they believed it had an oxygen backbone, I believe. No, it was like a silicon backbone. And then they figured out what it actually was. It's a silicon oxygen backbone. And so the technical name for silicone is siloxane. And dimethyl siloxane is a siloxane with a methyl alcohol on either side of it. And then polydimethyl siloxane is just a bunch of those in a row.
Okay.
So like cyclosiloxane, you'll see on some silicone lubes that are thicker, and that's just a ring of dimethyl siloxanes that have, instead of forming a long chain, formed a ring. So you'll see like cyclopentasiloxane, which is 5 of them in a ring, or hexa, whatever.
And then we'll often find the dimethicone in silicone lubes and things like that. Okay. Let's see. There was another one. Rusty Balzac. On YouTube was asking, is Reynolds silicone thinner composed of anything other than silicone oil? I don't know that we can specifically answer that, but silicone thinner in general.
I don't believe so. You don't get an ingredients list from the company, but you do get the MSDS, so you can infer a lot of things from the material safety data sheets. For example, I knew a long time before it was published and they paid for the funding that Moldstar 20T was skin safe because it uses the same MSDS as everything else in that lineup that is skin safe. So they have come out and said that it's skin safe, but I was using it as such for a long time, not saying that it was, but with the assurance that it was safe just based on the available information.
Okay.
Something I like to stress to people is that grades of silicone, something isn't medical grade because they've done something to it to make it medical grade. It's medical grade because they have tested that blend for use in some medical capacity. Be it, there's medical grades for prostheses, there's medical grades for implantation, for tools. So a silicone can be ungraded and be as safe as medical grade, but it's not being marketed to that purpose. So why pay hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars to have it tested for that?
Yeah, the way I understand it is that the raw materials, the silicone itself, is not FDA declared to be medical grade. It is the function or the product that is FDA approved or medical grade according to the FDA standards. And it is the end product that is registered, not the materials.
Yeah, it's it is the paperwork and the testing that has been done to the material by government contractors and reported to the FDA that it is in fact the thing. Medical grade, I believe, typically involves some animal testing, some of them. Testing silicone for food grade means it has to be immersed in a piece in ethyl alcohol, acetone, oil, and water to determine if anything in the material is absorbed by any of those liquids, to see if it's safe. And then skin safe, I imagine, is just skin.
Yeah.
I don't actually know how the skin safe certification works, but the thing is, it's not tested as skin safe to see if it's like okay to put in your body. It's tested as skin safe so you can use it as a mold making material to live cast or to make props for movies.
Right. Let's see. Again, Rusty Balzac is throwing out some factoids for us. Silicone oil has a specific gravity of around 0.97 and 20T specific gravity is 1.08, so adding oil will make it lighter. Okay. All right. And also it absorbs, silicone absorbs THC oil as well.
Not surprising.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of the things about silicone is that it does absorb oils, and that's just part of its nature.
Oh no, when are we going to be seeing weed dildos? Remember, I don't know if anyone does it anymore, but remember that couple of years when a couple companies announced scented sex toys?
Oh, God. Yeah, we're going back a ways.
That. Oh, that was vile.
Oh, man. So I want to throw it out there and let folks know if they have any questions to drop them in the chat. George will collate those. I should have mentioned this earlier, but I was kind of just nerding out there for a little bit and, getting into some of the technical parts that are interesting to me just because I've got you here and I can ask you those kind of questions. But I do have a couple of questions that folks have put to me earlier. The no frill does. How has that been doing for you? And do you think it still has a place in the market that we are in now?
Haven't seen anything of comparable size for the same price. Yeah, they're fantastic. They sell very well. There's absolutely a need there, and I don't think I'll live to see the day that there isn't. I would love to. I'd love for everyone to be able to afford, spending $70 on a dildo. I would love for money not to exist so I could just give these things away. But yeah, no frildos. As long as there's poverty anywhere, there will be a place for no frildos. And the thing is, I can't make these things inexpensive enough to sell to many parts of the world. I've never sold a toy to multiple continents, but many, many countries, especially in the global south and places affected by colonization. The economy simply isn't there in many places for people to even be able to spend $24 plus, $20 shipping to some places.
Right.
So there is a limitation to their effectiveness, and especially outside the United States, when shipping becomes more expensive, they aren't able to serve their purpose as well. And that's where things like not jelly rubber, but TPR come in. Like, it is less safe, but it's more safe than many other options. Like, a stick, cucumbers, vegetables, things that don't have flared bases. As you go into deeper levels of poverty, there become fewer good options for things. And the no-frill dough is able to serve down to a certain point, but it can't reach everyone. I'd love to be able to reach everyone, but that's too big a problem for one person. But the no-frill doughs are absolutely my best sellers. I have them in so many stores, and I love that I'm able to make silicone and safe toys affordable for so many more people.
Yeah, I saw that you were doing that, and I loved it. I mean, it was something I was really, really pleased to see. Okay, I want to jump back to a technical question, because this is something that has come up on a Discord discussion in the last couple of days. When you're vacuuming,
I'm not up to date on the drama. Go on.
When you're vacuuming silicone, can you boil it?
I don't think so. I mean, in theory, does silicone boil, like liquid silicone boil in a way that evaporates it? Is its boiling point lower than its combustion point?
Well, see,
I don't know. I've never thought about that. But I don't think you do.
My opinion was that, given the equipment that we have at the consumer/prosumer levels and the amount of time that we have in our pot life, it's almost impossible for us to boil off any silicone. I don't think we can get the vacuum level to the point where we would pass that, that we would reduce the boiling point of liquid silicone below room temperature.
Yeah, I mean, the first question is, what is the boiling point of liquid silicone? Because, not everything actually boils. Some things will just combust in oxygen or whatever's around before they ever actually boil off.
And there was some argument about it. There were a couple of people who were on the side that the theory says that it could boil. And I was on the other side that said, okay, the theory is great, but the reality is...
In practical application.
The example I used was...
How much of a vacuum do you need to pull?
Right. The example I used was, can a deer jump out in front of my car? Yes. But if I'm driving around downtown, the risk of me hitting a deer is nothing compared to the risk of me getting carjacked. Yep. And so, that was the example I used, was that, yes, it's possible in theory if you had perfect equipment and, unlimited budget. But given what we have, I don't think it's possible. So, yeah. Okay, let's get back to the questions that other folks have now that I've gotten my question in there. This was a good one, and you're a great person to answer this question because you have been in the business for some time now. Is how have you seen the business change over the last 5, 6, 7 years, and also what do you wish you knew back then?
There's so many more people doing it. When I got into making, it's not really DIY, but doing small manufacturing of sex toys.
Yeah.
All anyone knew about was Bad Dragon, and then everything else was Tantus and Pipe Dream, and Fused Silicone was doing their stuff up in Canada, but they're, I think, a larger operation. I'm pretty sure they're a larger operation. But it was me, Go to Me, BS Atelier, a couple of the longer running fantasy companies Damn Average had been around. It wasn't a lot of people, and there were still people on Etsy making dildos out of wax, literal candle wax, and selling them. That might still go on, honestly, but they're so thoroughly overwhelmed by the variety of makers out there. And I think I really got in like just before people started realizing that they could do this for a living. I mean, it's art. Very few of us actually make a living at it. Yeah. Most people have some kind of like side job or thing that's keeping them afloat. But I think I'm pretty sure I don't pay that much attention anymore. There's just so many. And I've seen so many companies come and go, some that deserved to and some that did not. Pour one out for fucking sculptures. There are so many out there. Geeky sex toys. So many companies that I deeply miss, and so many that I really, really wish had taken their place.
Didn't Damn Average go by the wayside?
Damn Average is on, I believe, indefinite hiatus. We still talk. Sheep is cool. But yeah, no, it's a rough business to try and stay in. The thing about any of the arts is that it's not the best or the smartest or the thing that determines whether you're going to succeed in the arts is you're able to sustain yourself while you're starting and trying, and 2, you are the last cockroach-ass motherfucker left standing. It's utter persistence. It's luck, it's persistence, and it's privilege of being able to support yourself while you try. That determines success in any artistic endeavor.
I fully admit that I have multiple lines of business, and Amavidi is one of them. And there are times where Amavidi does well, and then there are times that it doesn't. Like, the last couple of months have been fairly bad for me.
Brutal couple of months.
Yeah. COVID was actually really good for me because
I noticed. Let's see if we've got the same story. April, everyone's figuring out whether they're laid off. May, people have figured out whether they're furloughed or not. June, everyone's run out of things to watch on Netflix.
Yeah.
It went from Netflix to chill in June like that. And that was great. I mean, COVID sucks for so many reasons, but business-wise, 2020 was a pretty successful year.
Yeah, even 2021 was good for me. It wasn't quite as good as 20, but even this year started out fairly well. But April,
and now people have less money to spend because they're spending it all on food and gas, and silicone costs 45% more.
Yeah. The point that I was getting at was that, yes, I am a little bit privileged in the fact that I have multiple lines of business that, can pick up the gaps when things have downturns. And that was actually one of the reasons why I started Amavidi, was because I wanted it to be something that was not tied in lockstep with my other businesses. And then, if there are downtimes in one, then hopefully the other one would offset it. I think that if anybody were asking, things that, we might have learned over the time that we started, is that, the toy business is volatile and that you should be prepared for those downturns.
Yeah, even when things are good, I find it's good to have a bit of a cushion for the summer months. Yeah. Because like June, July, August, people are just going outside instead of staying in and fucking themselves, I guess. And then, Christmas and Valentine's Day can help you build up a cushion to pay your taxes and sit through the lean summer. But yeah, it's definitely, there's highs and lows for sure. And some of them are predictable and some of them are not. April Fool's also just a huge holiday in this business.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have a focus group or a testing group?
I share ideas with friends, but especially right now, the focus group is what do I think is funny. I've been burned out for years, and I continue to be the cockroach-ass motherfucker that's left at the end of it. That's my entire personality, is just being stubborn.
You and I will turn off the lights when the building burns down.
Yeah.
So.
But what was the question? How did I get here?
No, we're talking about focus groups.
Oh yeah, no. So yeah, right now the focus group is what do I think is funny, or coming up with an idea and sprinting down the stairs to shout it at my roommate. Because the way I've been dealing with artistic and creative burnout is when I got started, the way creativity works for me and the way I describe creativity is creative skills are the list of abilities and understandings and skills that you have to inflict what's going on in your brain upon the world. Because stuff will just bounce around in here like a bat in a microwave until I can let it out.
Yeah.
So I had so many ideas and I had to put some limitations on it so I could narrow the number of infinities that I was working within. And that's the 72 millimeter hexagonal mold. My molds are a 72 millimeter hexagon formed in Blender. And if it couldn't fit in that for the first many years, I wasn't making it, because that was a level of infinite possibilities that I could handle. I did that for a very long time. I will get back to it at some point. But right now, I'm tired. It served its purpose. And I'm just making fuckable axes and sticky hands and just all the stupid crap that I can think of that makes me smile. And that has been helping a great deal with creative burnout and how fucking difficult this industry is.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you kind of mentioned that, is that burnout is a thing. It is something that creatives have to... I don't call myself an artist. For some reason, I
didn't for a long time either, and I've started leaning back into it in the last year.
I'll consider myself a creative. I joke that, I survived my 30s, so I can't be an artist. Now, but I think that it's great that, we're kind of realistic about the fact that burnout exists and that we have to be able to give ourselves the space to deal with that. And I'm glad that you are taking that. I want to come back to the dice that you did. I want to come back to that in a second. Because
I'm amazed that no one did this before me. I thought of the idea, I was like, oh, there gotta be some of these. And I looked and I was like, well, there have to be some of these.
But, okay, so I wanted to come back. There was a question, how does he pour without release agent? And I don't know if you've... No, you said you actually use a release agent. Yeah.
No, I don't. Nothing in a can. If I look at the warning label for something and it reminds me of PVC pipe cement, I don't work with it. Release agent, it's apparently it's fine when it's solid on the thing and it's mostly just the various petrochemicals used to propel it. But, sometimes you just don't want to work with another thing with a mile-long warning label. So my release agent is soap and water. I pour the silicone into the mold, and then once it's cured, I get a little soap and water in around the edge of it and pop it out with using that as lubrication. There's no release agent; it's just lubricating the mold.
Okay. So it's lubricating the removal as opposed to
if you leave soap or water in the mold, then you get perfect little bubbles of where the soap was, and it's Not ideal. Not ideal.
So, a couple of questions I'm going to get to, and then we're going to come back to the dice because I really like the idea of the dice. Number one, who are you envious of? Who do you look up to, or who do you see as a somebody to model? Or
my role models in the industry are a mixed bag, because the industry was very different when the people who actually are my predecessors started up. It's really interesting going to proper adult industry events where there are veterans, because in the 90s, the 70s, the adult industry was very different to what it was today. The sort of person who survived in it or got into it was a different person. It's always been weirdos and outcasts, but as things are now, there is so much more understanding of how to be a good person, how to be accepting and aware of your place in the world. And so the people who I look up to in terms of how they behave in this industry, I can't always look up to for everything. So it's tricky, because there are designers who I admire their design work or the way they run their business very well. And I don't want to particularly name them in this context, because that's kind of a rude introduction to somebody. But
no, I absolutely understand.
Yeah.
Because there are certain people that I look up to that they've had missteps, I guess is one way of putting it.
Humans are imperfect beings, and we don't.
And if I were to say,
I understand where we're at in the culture. I'm the wrong person to critique the way we handle people's wrongdoing, especially past wrongdoing, because I'm the person who benefits the most from any critique of that, with this whole setup. But we could stand to be kinder as people, and there are absolutely people who should face more consequences than they have. I don't know what a world of proper restorative justice looks like. I'm not sure that's something I can ever truly imagine growing up in the world that I've grown up in. Mm-hmm. I want it to exist, but I don't know how to I don't know how to get there, and I'm the person to listen. I listen to the work, but I shouldn't drive it, kind of thing. So yeah, people in the industry are imperfect humans. The ones I respect the most are learning and growing with it, and it's a process, but it's tricky, Yeah. I deeply hope to be an old man who people are uncomfortable being proud of, because the world has progressed so much farther beyond what I think morality is. I try to do a good job, but there are things that I will find out 10, 15, 20 years from now that I was wrong about. People have thought they had morality figured out since we've been writing it down.
Well, you have not had a misstep, as far as I can see, and you are still one of my my inspirations and one of my idols. Okay, one of my favorite questions. What is your most mundane and random tool? Because George and I have talked about this.
Sometimes. Okay. I've had miles of use out of grocery store bamboo kebab skewers for mixing pigments. But a lot of tools you know what? I use silicone kitchen spatulas to mix silicone. That one's pretty mundane. Buckets, very mundane.
Yeah.
Well,
George and I have had conversations about, people who are creative take their tools and their inspiration from everywhere. One of my most mundane tools is I use a cuticle trimmer to trim the base on all of my toys.
Yeah.
And it's just, we find the tools that we need to do the things that we do.
So more in that vein, I use leather bevelers to do the edging on the no-frillos these days. I used scissors for a long time, but if I can keep a leather beveler sharp, it's a much more streamlined process. The problem with that for most people is that it doesn't work for like 0050 and lower. It works in the like 20A, 18A range, and there's a little bit of flexibility between those two measurements, and I don't know where it really stops working. But leather bevelers for anything in like 20A and above are fantastic.
Yeah. And a cuticle trimmer is basically a slightly smaller version of a leather beveler. So Rusty Balzac was asking, why doesn't the silicone stick to the mold when you don't use a mold release? And the thing is that...
Because it's not silicone.
Yeah.
It's plastic.
Yeah. I think the thing that Rusty missed was at the beginning of the conversation, we talked about how your molds are actually ABS and not silicone.
Yep. Acrylonitrile, butadiene, styrene, the same stuff they make Legos out of.
Your dice. Why don't you... Okay, I saw you did an Indiegogo on those. Mm-hmm. Are you still taking orders for those, or...
I have a pre-order page up on my website, yeah. So you can still get them before they launch in August, probably, but hopefully a little sooner. They're currently in production. They are being made by a gaming supplies company in Shenzhen. Okay. And at some point they will arrive to me and I'll have to ship them out. But yeah.
Tell me about them. I know what they are, but why don't you tell people about what they are?
Have you ever gotten a pair of sex dice at like right at the checkout in a sex toy store and you roll them and they just come up lick elbow? Have you ever rolled them and gone, this is for straight people? Have you rolled them and gone, this was made by a group of people who had never had sex?
Yeah.
Because I exclusively have had that experience. And the thing is, it's usually 2 6-sided dice, and there are more than 6 sexy things to do, and there are more than 6 sexy body parts to do them to. So I don't know how people fuck that up. But once again, lick elbow somehow. Right. I try not to be like negative about the other things I'm competing with, but sex dice gotta pick up the game somewhere.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'm giving them a run for their money because I've made a full polyhedral D&D style set of sex dice.
Everything so from a D20 all the way down to a D4, right?
Yep. The D4 is like the big 4 bits of like mix and match your body parts. It's hands, mouth, butt, and genitals, which I usually refer to as bits, because that's a fun, gender-neutral way of doing it.
Yeah.
The D6 is mouth verbs. The D8 is hand verbs. So you can roll and get something to do with your hands. You can roll and get something to do with your mouth. And D10 is location, where you're doing these things. The D12, then there's another D10 because there's 2 D10s in a polyhedral set, and this is really innovative. It's going to blow your mind. Numbers from 1 to 10, for intensity or like how many times you do something. Yeah, but truly cutting edge dice technology. And then the D12 is, I like to keep it pretty ambiguous. It's like moods, it's the vibe. They're open to interpretation. I have words for what the things represent, but I keep it deliberately like up to you so people can use their sexy imaginations to interpret the image as what they find sexy. Uh-huh. And then the D20 is body parts, because there are so many more than 6 sexy body parts.
Yeah, I never mentioned this to George. I don't know if you've seen George or not. She's in the background fielding questions and things like that. But she mentioned that the video is totally worth the price of admission.
I had so much fun shooting that. Me and one of my friends, knows more marketing things than I do, and I got his help. And there's also several TikToks which were removed. My TikTok account no longer exists, but there's like a proper infomercial style thing. It's wonderful. It was such a mess. I loved making it.
Yeah. I ran across it and I was like, this is perfect. This is wonderful. I would hope that more people figure out that this exists. So
I do too, because I ordered 1,000 of them.
TikTok, what happened there?
Apparently, the thing that really drove my page over the edge from acceptable on TikTok to too damn sexy was the chess set. Social media in general is a puritanical hellscape. TikTok is by far the worst.
Yeah. It is definitely a game that you have to play. Yeah. I go hot and cold on TikTok. I realize that, whenever I do a TikTok live, I make sales. So I have to acknowledge that it does have some part of my world. Whenever I do a TikTok, just a standard post, I'm not doing anything crazy. I'm doing a pour and I'm playing music from my teenage years, going back to, the 80s and early 90s. And, for me, it's just a way of kind of reminiscing and having a little bit of fun and showing what I do. And I haven't gotten shut down on TikTok yet. So, well then, I think I have caught everything up. So I'm going to want to wrap up here before too long. Rusty, again, Rusty Balzac, do you have a reusable mixing bucket suggestion?
The buckets from Smooth On. They're great. They got measurements on the side if you don't have like a gram scale. I use them. By the way, I have a great recommendation for a scale. American Way scales, as in the pun option of how to spell that, makes incredible accurate scales, especially ones you can plug in. So if it takes a long time to pour, you don't lose the numbers. Love that. Great. And I get like 0.1 of a gram accuracy on those, and they read nice and quick. But yeah, just plop a bucket on top of that. It's from Smooth On. It's great. I reuse them all the time. I haven't bought them in years.
Yeah, I use the basic buckets that you buy from Smooth On or any of the other suppliers that have the graduations on the side and all that kind of stuff. It's you buy them by the dozen or by the 100, which I have done more than once.
So Bain Marie, make sure it's not glass. Silicone can bond to glass. But other than that, sure.
Okay. So anything else that you want to get into the record?
Buy my toys.
George has been throwing the links into the chat as we've been going along, and they will go into the product, not the product description, but the video description as we go along. Actually, they are in there as we speak. But Funkit.Toys, is that correct?
Yep. Funkit.Toys will get you. Funkit Toys will get you there. Funkittoys will get you there.com for all of these. Dildo.design. Wankopedia.org I still haven't done anything with, but it'll get you to my FAQ. One day I would love for that to be like a sex toy wiki, but I'm so proud of the name, and eventually I hope it will be actually useful, but right now it takes you to my website.
Yeah. I started the conversation off with the fact that you were one of the inspirations and one of the things that got me started. And I just want to throw it out there one more time that I really appreciate you jumping on this session with me. George.
Yeah, it was fun.
George says that you are super fun, and I would hope that we can do this again sometime. I think what we need to do next time is we need to go nerdy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Did we not?
We did, but it took us a while to get there. And I think that's where we need to go next time.
We can do a deeper dive into this.
Yeah. All right. Well, Kenton, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm going to take a moment here and wrap up, and then we will get out of here. Say goodnight, Kenton.
Good night, Kenton.
And that was something that I had been looking forward to for the last couple of weeks, that gave me the opportunity to talk to somebody who has been an inspiration and somebody who I have looked up to and wanted to nerd out with for some time. And we will do this again next week. I think that next week, who do we have next week, George? Oh, we have Fantasy Grove next week. We have Fantasy Grove coming in next week. George will not be here, so she is off producing her own show on a stage with people. And yeah. All right, everybody. Have a good night, and we are out. Bye. All right, button. Who's got the button? How do I turn this thing off?